This one? Yeah, it's working now, I think. So, we're starting the next session then. Yeah, first of all, welcome all of you to today's session. My name is Nico Kreibich. I'm senior researcher at Wuppertal Institute and will moderate the session today. And we will focus on, as you can see, Paris-aligned carbon markets. So we'll discuss the question what role carbon markets could play and should play under the Paris Agreement, and what actually Paris alignment means on the ground, and what are the different roles that the different actors can contribute in aligning carbon markets with the Paris Agreement. And for this, to discuss this topic, we have a distinguished panel today. Unfortunately, Honorable Minister of Green Economy and Environment from Zambia, he wanted to participate also. Minister Collins Mazavu will not be able to join us, unfortunately, due to a president's schedule running in parallel, so he will not be able, at least at this point in time. But we have these other panelists, and I'm very happy to introduce them to you. First, Sandra Greiner. She's a lead consultant with Climate Focus, where she's heading the work on Article 6. And she is also supporting African countries in the development of national domestic carbon market frameworks. Then I introduce you to Kaya Bajaf. I hope I pronounce it more or less okay. She is a manager for government relations at Gold Standard, and she's engaged with governments on Article 6, and other segments of her work include this bilateral or this work for governments. She's previously worked in international climate research and grant making in India and Switzerland. And we have Thomas Ford. He's advisor to the German Federal Ministry for Financial Affairs and Climate Action. Sorry for that. It's always difficult, this BMWK, to pronounce the name. He is Article 6 negotiator and also very involved in bilateral cooperation with partner countries. And by the way, BMWK is also organizing today's event, so thank you for that. Before we start with the panel discussion, we will hear a presentation by Marlene Alberg. She's responsible for the subject areas of carbon pricing, international carbon markets, and other issues related to the voluntary carbon market. And she is a deputy head of division, and the division also has a long name, which I will say now, Division KC3, International Financing of the Transformation International Market Mechanisms. So, yes, with that, I pass the word to you, Marlene, and we see the presentation. Thank you.
I'm not sure. Oh, it's working. Perfect. So, warm welcome also from my side. And I would like to give you, to set the scene on the question, what is a Paris-aligned carbon market? So I click here, I'm not sure. Does it work? So next. So what is Paris-aligned carbon market? I mean, everyone is thinking about, okay, if I implement a carbon market or a carbon pricing instrument, this is, of course, to achieve my national NDCs or national NDC. But there are several implications also in regard to if when countries and are cooperating and there are different participants involved in the carbon market. So at the Paris summit in July, the EU and other parties signed up the call for action for Paris-aligned carbon markets. So, one moment. Next slide. I don't know. The clicker is not working. I'm not sure. No, it's too fast. So the objective of this call is to allow domestic and international compliance markets and voluntary carbon markets to further support the achievement of the Paris Agreement goals, while providing much needed finance for the joint climate and sustainable development challenges. So that is the objective of this call, and this call is consists 3 pillars. So next slide, please. The first pillar is about expansion and deepening of domestic carbon pricing and carbon market instruments. This means to align the existing carbon pricing and carbon markets instruments with the national targets. I think we will hear more about that also later on the panel. But furthermore, also undertake periodically reviews for increased ambition with the aim to ensure alignment with the net zero goal. Furthermore, of course, transparency of the price as well as effectiveness should also be enhanced, and to provide also capacity building for countries that are interested to introduce carbon pricing schemes. Next slides, please. The second pillar is about to support host countries for full implementation of the Paris Rule Book on Article 6. And here, of course, the core requirements is to ensure that the international cooperation involving the transfers of ITMOs deliver ambitious emission reductions and removal enhancements, that it is consistent with the overall pathways to net zero and avoid lock-in to unsustainable level of emissions. Furthermore, to address the risk of non-permanence and carbon leakage. And of course also to secure a share of mitigation and other benefits arising from mitigation activities for host countries. So next slide, please. So the third the third, there should be a third, not a second. The third pillar is about high integrity in the voluntary carbon market. So this pillar is divided in 2 parts. The one is the demand side requirements, as well as the supply side requirement. One step back, please. Demand side. Thank you. So here, it is important to ensure a high standard of transparency, the buyer side, regarding how the corporates are using the credits. Then also corporates should prioritize its own emission reduction, including through investments in beyond the value chain mitigation, and of course purchase only high quality credits which are linked to climate. Furthermore, they should publish their commitments and their approach in regard to their climate action, and scrutinize whether they are on the right path to net zero by 2050 in the scope 1 to 3. and considering allocation and share of the finance contribution to adaptation and loss and damage for the benefit of LDCs and SIDS. Next, supply side. So finally, we come now to the supply side, so the host country part, or the host country responsibility of within this framework. There, of course, it is important that progressively align the voluntary carbon standard to those of the compliance market, to ensure additionality and permanence of emission reduction and removals enhancement. And here again, on the supply side, we need, of course, also make sure that there is no lock-in, and also avoid over-allocation of emission reduction. Furthermore, ensure that the credits meet high level of social and environmental integrity, and there is also again important to provide capacity building and technical assistance to developing countries, to help them to ensure to participate in a way in the carbon market that this contributes to their NDC and their long-term goal. So with that, I pass over to Nico to start the discussion, and I'm really looking forward to the input from the panelists, what they think, how to implement a Paris-aligned carbon market. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much, Marlene, for providing this high-level overview of what carbon-aligned or Paris-aligned carbon markets could look like, and what key elements are. Yeah, I've just been informed that Dr. Dauti Chibamba will be joining the panel and represent Zambia. So he's the permanent secretary, and I think he will join us in a second. But yeah, okay, thank you. That's very helpful. It's really a second. Thank you very much. Great. Yeah, and I would then directly kick off the discussion with the question, what is your interpretation of Paris alignment? And I would direct this question to you, Mr. Chibamba. Is it how are Paris-aligned carbon markets different from those that that we all know today? So what is your view on this after having heard this?
Yeah, thank you very much for the question. So I'm here to stand in for my Minister of Green Economy and Environment, Honorable Engineer Collins. He's not able to be here because he has a tight schedule with our President. So our understanding of the Paris-aligned carbon credits is that our understanding of the Paris Agreement-aligned carbon credits is that these are the credits that will be selling following the Paris Agreement rulebook. There are certain procedures there that you'll have to follow in order to trade along that line. For example, first of all, you need to have the registry where everything that you generate is registered. There's strict monitoring and verification systems that we have to put in place. Most importantly, there must be transparency in order to avoid greenwashing. So there are all those steps that we need to follow under the Paris Agreement. It is different from the voluntary carbon market. It's just bilaterally agreed between themselves and ourselves. So the Paris-aligned carbon markets will be more formal, and they'll be more transparent than what we see in the voluntary carbon market arena. And in the voluntary carbon market arena, really, it's basically what we agree between ourselves. And already, for example, we have a lot of players in the voluntary carbon market. And the issue of transparency, for example, is a very sticking issue already, even in Zambia right now. Because at the moment the project kicks off, it is the investor versus the communities. But apparently it looks like that communities may not really understand what is in it for themselves. For example, how much investment goes into the project. And at the end of the day, when the carbon credits are sold, what is the benefit sharing mechanism looking like? So to me, that's the main difference. Under the Paris-aligned route, it's formal, the steps, the rules of the game are very clear. But under voluntary carbon markets, those are not very clear. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Then I'll ask Sandra on her view on what carbon or Paris-aligned carbon markets are.
Thank you very much, Nico. And well, I think first of all, it's a very beautiful term, Paris-aligned carbon market. And so I want to congratulate those who coined it. I'm not sure if it is still up to definition what it is, because Marlin just introduced to us those 3 pillars of the call for action for Paris-aligned carbon markets. And I think what we see in there when it comes particularly now to Article 6, voluntary carbon markets, is an emphasis on integrity on both the supply side and the demand side, and on the in terms of the creation of the credits. I think the principles that are there that to have the baselines aligned with the long-term targets of the Paris Agreement, etc. I think that's exactly also what is currently being discussed under Article 6 and more specifically the supervisory body recommendations on methodologies, just or operationalizing what is already in the Article 6.4 mechanism. And also to congratulate the supervisory body for having done that task just ahead of the COP. And here, Mr. Alec Muvundika is here representing or being one of the members of the Article 6.4 supervisory body. So I think that's where the understanding now goes. We have to see whether what the supervisory body has prepared will be adopted here. We all very much hope so that it can become operationalized. But so I think in terms of what is the definition, what is the interpretation, I think this is where it is going towards higher integrity. If you ask me personally what I would understand, I would also stress it's very important to have speed and volume, because only if now carbon markets are unleashed very fast, right? They can probably play that role in scaling up and being transformational.
Thank you very much. And with that, I would ask Kaya to share her views on Paris-aligned carbon markets.
Thank you, Nico. I hope this mic is working. Is this good? Thank you. And thank you for introducing me before as well. And thanks to the previous panelists for talking about their views on what Paris-aligned carbon markets are. And also for Marlin for highlighting a couple of key principles that Paris-aligned carbon markets should have. And just to repeat a couple of points, of course, a few key things that I want to highlight first is basically that Paris-aligned carbon markets, what it means basically is that under the Paris era, we have the long-term temperature goals, of course. We have the 1.5 degree goal, the net zero goal. And so countries voluntarily cooperate to meet these long-term temperature goals, and they set their contributions by nationally determining them. So this feeds into the carbon markets, and how this looks on ground is that carbon markets under the Paris Agreement are more nationally determined, and they're more and countries are coming together under Article 6 to bilaterally cooperate, but also just multilaterally cooperate and meet these long-term temperature goals, and ensuring that financial flows are going towards impact on ground and where they need to go. So. And that this is done in a fair and equitable way, and in a way that can be scaled up, as Sandra just said. How this is different from the Kyoto era and the Kyoto mechanisms is that under the Paris era we have more optionality. We have a lot more mechanisms. For example, we have the 6.2, under which we bilaterally cooperate between countries, and the 6.4 mechanism through which we generate credits post 2020. And there's a lot of other options that have that the Paris Agreement and Article 6 offers us. Then there's also lesser limits in geographical scope. When we compare it to the Kyoto era. For example, under the CDM, you had projects that existed only in developing countries, whereas under the Paris Agreement era, there's no such limits really. It's not developing versus developed, but just where the projects are, where the impact is needed, etc. And we also have, through corresponding adjustments that are introduced under Article 6, we also have more potential for transparency under the carbon markets. Lastly, host countries have a stronger role under Article 6 versus under the CDM. Host countries can, as I said before, one of the key principles under the Paris Agreement era is that the goals are nationally determined. So host countries do have a stronger role and do have a stronger participation under Article 6. So I see that we are learning from the past, we are learning from the Kyoto mechanisms, and we are coming up with stronger market mechanisms that meet the overall goals of not only climate but sustainable development goals. So that's how I see the transition of the markets as such, not really the difference, but the building on. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. And with that, Thomas, what's your view on Paris-aligned carbon markets?
Yes, thank you for this question. I think it's a kind of direction of the work of the next 1-2 years to make it clear what does it mean for the markets. First of all, general remarks. Kaya started with the general remarks for what it is good to have markets. I think it is absolutely clear that we have the long-term goals, different ones on the temperature goals, but also on the financing goals. So everyone is expecting that carbon markets can contribute to the transformational processes we need to speed up. So these components must be addressed, in my view, through the markets. And one point to this, many people have a theory that we will have no room for markets, right? This will be the day when we have achieved national determined contributions to net zero. But we are on the way to it. We need the next 2-3 decades worldwide to speed up, and markets will play a crucial role, I think. And therefore, the alignment with the strategies of the host countries are very important, that host countries can make a choice whether it's useful to spend, let me say, to spend to others outside the country these credits. Are they really supportive for this transformational process? Are the economy behind it, the financial figures, are correct in the cooperation formats? That's very important things host countries have to think about along the long-term strategy. And I think opportunity costs for the host countries to make this financial figure a little bit more lively. It's necessary that they have a plan for what they will spend these certificates. And this must be also not set in a way of competition between host countries, but as a group to the buyers. And with the buyers, I come to the point that we speak very often about the voluntary carbon market. We see the big figures this year that will contribute to the end of this year more than 1 gigaton. depends on the prognosis you take, but will expand to the end of the decade. And when it's true, only the half, that means that we will contribute to the ambition gap of the Paris Agreement in the implementation formats we have. So I think it is absolutely necessary to align this, but this is not this general wording. The intention, it is also to make it operative. So it is important that the host country, as my colleague from Zambia has said, has the overview about the activities with the registries. These things, this technical infrastructure, must come first. Otherwise, it will be difficult to get an overview about every activity from the voluntary carbon market, or including the other financing things. So I think one of the main deliverers of this COP here is to set the path for implementing the infrastructure, spend enough money that it could be also implemented. This is one point. The other point is, and I know Zambia is on the way and have created their intention to use Article 6 and have also a project pipeline discussed in the government. And this is a sovereignty of a host country to have a reflection on this, and we are really proud of it to support this process. And I think it should be done worldwide, that first the strategies of the host countries could be developed without looking for this low-hanging fruits. That's a very important point. And this is done through the activities which are chosen by the host country and not the things we have learned on the Kyoto markets. I think it's very important that we get rid of this cheap thinking of certain project types. Otherwise, we cannot contribute to the ambition gap and cannot accelerate these things. So on the operational things, we need the work. I said these technical things are clear, but really does it mean that we have all rules of Article 6.4 when we have got them this year, next year, implemented for aligning the voluntary car markets? I'm not sure that it's the ideal way. I think it must be discussed which features we need. I think it is on the accounting system and on ensuring the ambition. And what I personally feel is what we, and this is my last sentence, is that we have the rules here in Article 6.4 at any point in near future, I hope, means that voluntary car market standards go beyond it. As we have seen it in the starting of the Kyoto mechanism, that gold standard has gone beyond the CDM rules. So this is a way to also to explore how these market activities could fit to the host countries and have accepted the way of sustainable development goals and on the route to low emission development.
Thank you, Thomas, and thanks to all of you for sharing your views and also for linking the process to the Article 6 negotiations. I think that's key, and also for highlighting the benefits, potential benefits of these markets. Now, jumping from the overall overview and high level to the national context, I would like to ask you, Mr. Shibamba, how is Zambia planning to use carbon markets for your national NDC, so for your nationally determined contribution, and how do you ensure that these carbon market activities contribute to staying within 1.5 degrees Celsius?
Yeah, thank you very much for that question. Indeed, because we are a party to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, we have the obligation to mitigate under the Paris Agreement. And we are seeing this space of carbon markets as one opportunity through which we can do that. So when we are in the carbon market space, what we are doing as a country, we do allocate some credits to count towards our mitigation activities. And because our biggest challenge is adaptation, in doing that mathematics, we sometimes try to limit the credits that we can count, that can count towards our NDCs. And then we push the other credits to the other buyers who take them on, as long as the price is higher on the other side. Because like I said initially, the problem that we've had this far is that the process of carbon trading has been too opaque in our country. You don't know how much the investor puts in. You don't know what the benefit sharing mechanism looks like. And this is where now the government has come on board. What we are doing at the moment, we are piloting a jurisdictional approach. Rather than have numerous players, each one doing their own thing in one province, for example, we are piloting using one province. We take a jurisdictional approach. We take the province as a region. Anybody who's doing carbon in there, we nest them. We bring them together. So when we want to sell, we look at the quantum, how much carbon credits we have for sale. How much does each player contribute to that total? So now we have brought in the concept of transparency. So now as government, we know how much investment has gone in there, how much credits are available for sale, who is the buyer, at what price, so that when the deal is signed, we are all in the clear. So when we have sold, then how many of those credits, carbon credits we have sold, are we going to retain to meet our obligations for mitigation under the Paris Agreement? And how many of those are we going to sell to the other buyer who's going to give us a higher price? So basically, that's what we're trying to do. And this is where we are seeing that this Paris Article 6 mechanism is going to help us. Because it's not only under the compliance mechanism that it improves or it enhances the process, but even those voluntary carbon markets, some of them will have to be subjected to how much they are aligned or how much they really comply, even if they are not forced to comply. But you can make comparisons whether what they are doing on the other side is in line with what the Paris Agreement requires. Because we really have that challenge. I mean, we are outside the target, the global goal of 2 degrees Celsius. I think the current emissions gap or analysis report is giving us a 2.9 degree mitigation gap. So, in a nutshell, we understand our obligation to contribute towards the global goal of 2 degrees Celsius. And we are hopeful that this Article 6, if it's finalized here, it is going to give us that platform that we can use as a reference point in order for us to achieve the goals that we need to do under the agreement. Thanks.
Thank you very much. And with that, I would like to ask Sandra, with your experiences in working together with governments, in particular from Africa, and being involved in the negotiations, what is their expectation and related to Article 6 and also the voluntary carbon market? Could you a little bit go into detail on this? That would be great.
Okay, thank you. Well, there are lots of expectations, and perhaps just to say that in the Article 6 negotiations, I'm affiliated with the Gambia, and I'm also coordinating with the delegates from African countries. Yeah, well, they are just starting basically right now. I think at this very moment, it kicked off with Article 6.2 negotiations, and there's a full agenda today. Given that a lot was accomplished already on Article 6 with the rule book that was adopted in Glasgow 2 years ago, I think the negotiations are now more generally at a technical level, where some issues are still pending to fully operationalize. So when it comes to Article 6 and VCM and how they are aligned, I would say this is not directly on the table right now, but certainly there's an expectation that Article 6 would serve as a standard setting or as a reference point, and that by that also there would be conversion among carbon markets. But generally, thinking about the expectation from African countries in voluntary carbon markets, Article 6, I think much of the momentum is currently moving towards the adoption of carbon market frameworks or guidelines in countries. And I understand Zambia has also recently launched its guideline. So I think this is where really the expectations become more manifest now. How do you operationalize it on the ground? And here I would say there's not a huge difference in whether something is under VCM or Article 6.4 or Article 6, because the expectation generally, I think, is about bringing benefits, right? Bringing investments, bringing finance, bringing technology, and bringing also very tangible benefits, like Dr. Chibamba said, to the communities. Having a fair share of benefits. And so on the one hand, I think through the projects themselves to bring access to energy, environmental benefits, better health, reduction of poverty, etc. But at the same time also a share in whatever economic benefits there are, right? And whatever revenues are flowing. So I think that's really the critical point. And obviously also just aligning with what Dr. Chibamba said, that starts with transparency, right? And having a good overview of both what is happening, but also what are the prices in the market.
Thank you very much. Now with that, we would change perspective, the continent at least. What is Germany's view on carbon markets in its national context? You have you're part of the European emissions trading system. You have a national scheme also. What's the role of carbon markets for Germany, for the German government, and also the voluntary carbon market, or potentially also a domestic voluntary carbon market? Thomas.
Yeah. The most of you may think the European Union is not a buyer, not a compliance buyer for international credits. That's right. We have decided during a very early phase ahead of the Paris Agreement to go a domestic way in the European Union because we have benefited a lot of the Kyoto mechanisms, so that we have not seen enough progress in the ETS on the installation level. So we decided to go in other way. So the question is, what is the interest when we are not compliance buyer for the EU or Germany especially? We think that carbon markets are really fitting instrument for accelerating the cooperation between countries. So they are compliance buyer from other governments. I don't want to listen to them, it's only a few, but we see the main demand coming from the voluntary carbon market. Companies would like to compensate really the emissions to get on a carbon neutrality pathways. I know this is contested whether it is possible or not, but I would like to see the action and would like to open in a realistic way to get carbon neutral for companies. And we must see that are not German companies or European companies or North American. Their operations are worldwide. So when we speak about carbon neutrality, we need to get a picture when a company is operating in Zambia, maybe with a German background, then they're joining the carbon neutrality in Zambia would be the challenge. And whether this is accounted or not for the neutrality in Germany, for example, depends on what Dr. Sabimi has said. They made the decision which of these certificates could go outside the country. Maybe this is a real option for companies, and we are trying to get these companies involved in these projects. So this is directly a test whether it works or not. So the interest is first to mobilize the voluntary carbon market, and when the promise of voluntary carbon markets is right, then it's worthwhile to do this. The other point is, with Article 6.4, we will get an instrument for result-based carbon finance to see with the methodologies what is the real result of certain activities so that we can bring it into programs. And Germany especially is very active in bilateral, multilateral funds, so that we would like to go this way, but therefore we need really the Article 6.4 rules. And the political component is not only having this instrument at hand, it is also to have a clear instrument for the companies, which they can follow. And it comes not to the bargaining side, whether it's a little bit more or a little bit less credits we could generate under these and that activities. So it is also an advantage for each government to have something neutral in the hand, so that you have a benchmarking system which companies has to follow. That makes it more transparent and more also for all stakeholders control could be much better. I think this is a very important point, and I hope many countries will go this way, that the climate finance would be a little bit more controlled when it is about mitigation action. About removals, we have to discuss separately. I don't want to bring in the discussion now. So far?
Thank you very much. Thank you also for highlighting the relevance of the voluntary carbon market for Germany, and also for, you mentioned, referred to one concept, carbon neutrality, and this somehow directly brings us to the next question and set of, or next topic, so to say. So it's the misuse of credits, because as you all know, the voluntary carbon market has been criticized a lot in the last year. So my question to you, Kaya, would be, what is the role of certification standards in avoiding the misuse of carbon credits on the voluntary carbon market? So how do you see your role there?
Thanks for your question, Nico. So we've all read the criticism against carbon markets in the last year, and to make it clear, it's against a certain activity type, and it's under avoided deforestation. So just going back to the question that you just asked, how standards can avoid the misuse of credits. Carbon credits are not tangible assets. So there is a lot of complexity in quantifying emission reductions and how the impact is actually made on ground. So standards such as ourselves work on certain methodologies, implementing them, and work with project developers who deliver the benefits on ground. And we enable these complex methodologies to capture and quantify emission reductions. And see whether the impact is being delivered on ground. Of course, standards and processes that are in place right now aren't perfect. So I think the role of a standard over here is really to have mechanisms and processes in place that quickly move once a problem is highlighted, and adapt our processes or methodologies or make inquiries to ensure that the issue at hand is addressed. So, for example, Gold Standard has grievance mechanisms and processes in place to see if an issue is brought to hand. We deal with these grievances and issues immediately and as independently as possible through an independent investigation, and adapt our processes as such and to address the issue at hand. So going back to the activity type, so avoided deforestation. At Gold Standard, we don't certify projects under RED Plus for avoided deforestation. And the reason for that is that we don't think avoided deforestation projects, we think avoided deforestation, of course, is an integral solution, and we think it's very necessary, of course. But we don't think carbon crediting is the right platform to support avoided deforestation or finance that. And the reason for that is that for avoided deforestation, the baseline setting and the quantifying of impact is quite different from other activity types. So, and it's also more prone to leakage. And I'm not a technical person over here, but it's also more prone to leakage. And there are quite a few risks that carbon crediting poses to this activity type. So we at Gold Standard, we try to we don't think it's the best platform, carbon crediting, and hence we don't certify projects under a RED Plus. We are also exploring different avenues to enable finance flows under this activity type, but not through carbon crediting. And so just to conclude, I think that standards do have a great role to play, and it's important to identify what mechanisms must be used for which purposes. And I think at Gold Standard, we're trying to do that the best possible, because integrity is, of course, how we started and how we want to continue maintaining ourselves in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kaya, for also outlining their perspective on these forestry credits, in particular the avoided deforestation credits. Yeah, we've also heard from Germany that there are some plans how to deal with or with the role that the voluntary carbon market could play, and the companies how they could use it. Now, I would have one question to you, Dr. Chibamba. Is it, in your view, primarily the role of the countries where so the main demand comes from to control this, the use of credits, or do you also see that there is a role, responsibility maybe also for host countries, so for those countries hosting activities that are generating credits that will be used on the voluntary carbon market? And is it possible at all to understand how carbon credits are being used and the claims that are being made?
Yeah, this is a complicated one, because Kaya, our greatest potential is credits that we are going to generate through avoiding deforestation. And as you rightly put it again, that's where the biggest problem is. So for me now, this is where certification becomes crucial. We don't really care who's going to do it, but if there's somebody who's going to help us to certify those carbon credits, to confirm that indeed they have been generated in the right manner and they have been sold properly, that is what we are interested in. And this is why even now we are working on these guidelines, for example. It's part of the process to see how we can close those gaps. So yes, guidelines we are developing, and it's a slow process. We will not do it in one day. But even as we are doing the guidelines, certification will be crucial. Because for us to find good buyers, our credits should have that integrity. The buyers should be convinced that indeed these credits were generated in the right manner. So for us, certification will be crucial. We need every support that we can get so that our credits are certified. Now, as to whether it's demand-driven by we, the people that are hosting the projects, or the buyers that are coming to invest, I'm not too sure whether there's that big appetite on the buyer side, but I think we, as the hosts of the projects, are more than interested in that. And we can create that demand if indeed there's a window for us to get that support. Certification is the way to go, because then we'll avoid greenwashing. Thanks.
Thank you very much. With that, also highlighting the need for cooperation between different actors like governments and certification standards. Thank Thanks. I don't know if you, Thomas, would like to add something on this, on the
Yes,
use of credits?
a little bit, because the guidance on removal just mentioned, and we are just in the second year to discuss this removal guidance. And what I would like to mention is that there is a new tool as an idea to make a risk assessment of reversals. I think this will bring in potentially more clarity on the questions which projects could run, could be certified. And this will be not solved at this COP, but the work plan must be decided. And I think this is a way forward to solve the problems, because from the negotiator side, from the different country groups and interest groups, we have not seen really advancement on this question of avoided deforestation. So maybe the risk assessment of reversals, it's a way forward. I think this is the most important point, that we get it, and not saying, okay, come back next year, put the next try on the better formulated guidance on removal. We should define what is necessary to clear on technical details level, and that means someone needs to work it out. We have the normal sessions, we can decide about workshops, about submissions, etc. We should do it.
Thank you for laying out the work that needs to be done on this question of removals. Now coming to the next topic, it's the topic of support and capacity building. You, as Climate Focus, you have been supporting conducting VCM dialogue in Nairobi, I think was one in Africa, and in Asia there was another one where you brought together different stakeholders or different government representatives. What are your main takeaways, or the expectations regarding the support needed by countries that participated in these VCM dialogues? And maybe you could also elaborate a little bit on the format that you have used to foster these discussions.
Yeah, thank you for that question. And actually, these VCM days or dialogues have been co-hosted by BMW UK jointly with the UNFCCC Secretariat at all the climate weeks in Nairobi during the African Climate Summit. I think, unfortunately, in Latin America, it couldn't go through because of protests, but now recently also in Malaysia during the Asia Pacific Climate Week. So I think the question that was discussed was, in this format also of governments, what are the expectations from the VCM? More broadly, how do they align with Article 6? So it was breakout groups basically, and personally I was involved in the one from Nairobi where I know the results best. But I think generally for governments, as we mentioned before, there's quite some convergence, I think, happening between VCM and Article 6. So when it comes to what are the expectations or how are domestic frameworks being structured, I think there's always like a common requirement appearing towards registration of projects, of giving some sort of endorsement of the activity being informed. And I think that builds also on this, on the general experience that governments have had with the VCM in the past, which was a bit mixed. So on the one hand, seeing the potential, but on the other hand, also not really knowing what was going on, because there was no central database in the countries. So not knowing where projects are, what they are generating in terms of emission reductions, but also where these credits go in the end, right? And who's using them, and for which purpose, and are they used directly by the buyer, or are they untraded somewhere else? Are they used for good purposes, for good claims, right? I think all these things have been quite opaque to governments, which I think generally then underpins the need for more transparency. What I think also came out of the VCM Day, particularly in Nairobi, was nevertheless overwhelming support to say we want to attract more investments. So they are generally a great chance. But of course, the rules have to be designed carefully, and then we come back to, of course, all the thoughts on revenue sharing and transparency. And I also want to highlight something else where Climate Focus was recently involved in, which was a joint initiative of AITA, the Business Partnership for Market Implementation, AITA BPMI, and the West African Alliance on Carbon Markets and Climate Finance, which we are also supporting. And together a conference was convened in Abidjan at the end of September, which was called the West African Carbon Market Hub. And from there, I think we had very intense discussions between private sector and public sector around carbon markets and how they can bring benefits. And out of that, I think a very also productive call emerged, the Abidjan call for a West African carbon market hub, which details some of these thoughts on how you can have a flourishing market, basically, and balance between private and public sector interests.
Okay, thank you. So another call to action, I assume. Thank you. Maybe could you elaborate the expectations or requirements in terms of the support for dealing with carbon markets from the Zambian perspective? What are the additional support need, the capacity support that you're needing?
Yeah, thank you very much. To start with is the infrastructure. I agree with my colleague from Germany. For us to trade properly, we need the infrastructure, the registry, monitoring and verification system that has to be in place. Of course, we are trading already. We will not wait for that, but in terms of additional support, that to me would be the starting point. Now, in terms of capacity, we see it a little different. I think we need to get to a point where we can develop experts. We may not have 10 or 20, even just 1 or 2, because that is very key. Carbon is an abstract issue, and you are dealing with local communities. If local communities cannot understand climate change, what more carbon? So I think in our case, we are looking at options where you can do, is it apprenticeship, if you want to call it? If we identify a very, very viable young man, attach this young man to some expert. For example, we have Alik here. In him, we totally trust. So if there are options like we identify a very viable graduate, can we attach him as a mentee to Alik to go through these all core processes, but specifically looking at carbon. And then if there are scholarships, maybe we can move this person from mentee to do MSc around climate change, but kind of specializing in carbon. So for me, I would really look for those windows where we can look for viable graduates, attach them so that we walk them through the process. Because then, when it comes to the actual trading, these are our experts that are going to guide us to say, the way it is done is this or is that. Most of the projects in our context don't work very well because you find the host government doesn't have those expertise that really can guide the policymakers on how best to run those projects. So for me, 2 things. hardware and software, where we start taking stock of what we're doing. And then we need the human skills in order to run that hard and software to make a complete carbon story. Thank you.
Thank you very much for highlighting the country internal capacity building and developing the capacities in country. Unfortunately, we're running out of time. I would ask the Gold Standard Kaya the perspectives to provide the perspective on Gold Standard, but unfortunately, very briefly only on this capacity building question and the support Gold Standard can provide.
All right, thank you. That was going to be my longest response, but it's okay. So, just to quickly brief, I think it's well established that Gold Standard has been around for a long time, 2 decades exactly this year, and we have an established expertise, hence in the carbon crediting space and infrastructure, governance structure, and other processes to ensure that carbon crediting and GHG mechanisms, etc., are brought to light, and we're able to support, and we have the expertise, and we're able to support on these areas. So we are hence well placed to be able to support capacity development across market actors, whether it's governments or project developers or other market actors. And in the last year, ever since Article 6, the Article 6 rulebook was adopted, we are gearing up our support towards governments. And a good example of that is the Early Mover Program, which was funded by BMWK and which was concluded earlier this year. Here we looked to support early moving actors in the carbon market space to initiate implementation of Article 6. And through this, we supported governments on capacity development, particularly in Uganda. We developed a blueprint for the implementation of Article 6, as well as worked with different actors in the government as well as the private sector to support the Article 6 implementation. And also, we came up with a couple of reports that were quite useful to the market. Particularly, I want to highlight the preparedness report, which was assessing preparedness of Article 6 in 20 different countries where the largest markets are at the moment. I also just want to quickly highlight that we will be launching a new program soon, again funded by the BMWK, and taking away learnings from the Early Mover Program. And based on these learnings, we will be implementing activities through this program to take further the work that was done under the Early Mover Program. One of the examples is, of course, a platform that we will have host on our website, taking forward the preparedness report that was quite useful to different market actors. So in that way, I just want to conclude that we are quite well placed, we are doing the work, and we are looking forward to taking the work further and increasing our ambition and having impact as much as possible through our platform. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kavya. And now, Thomas, we've heard from support activities from Germany. A lot of activities are also included in this preparedness document you referred to. What is, like, from your view, the key element that should be covered in the future in terms of capacity support and in future programs maybe? And with that, I think we will have to close the session also. Lisa's standing there. So,
okay. I think I should be very short.
Exactly.
Our idea is that this complicated carbon markets after the Kyoto Protocol, now with the relation to the NDCs and the clear issue to accelerate mitigation action. It means that it's a complicated transformational phase on the political level, but also on the practical level. Therefore, we need a long-time cooperation on capacity building. It is good when it's done on the bilateral level, but we need it through the UNFCCC. I think I would like to highlight the RCCs, the regional collaboration centers, that are helpful to each country in the region and building more trust, because it's a little bit separated from the concrete interest in buying certificates.
Thank you very much, Thomas, for showing us the way on where key cooperation should be going, key support should be provided. With that, I have to say that we will not have the possibility to have Q&A, but hopefully you will have the possibility outside in a bilateral way to discuss specific questions. So on the terrace. Okay, thank you very much. So thanks to the panelists. Thanks also to Marlene for the presentation, for the discussion.